So welcome to another fantastic Faena Art event. Tonight, we're going to have a really interesting conversation on conceptual art, on design, and we have a dear friend of Faena, Rose, the Chilean-American artist. Is it okay I say Chilean-American artist?
It's pretty good.
I didn't know if you claim both or just one. Or...
I'm happy to take both.
All right, awesome. Sebastian Errazuriz, and he's here because he's going to share with us his work, a body of work from the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, 20 years of work.
Why don't you share with us a little bit, but don't give away too much.
I won't.
Pique their interest a little bit, but tell us about what you're going to discuss.
So first, super happy to be with Faena. It's almost like a family, both the Rose members and Faena Arts Foundation. Extremely grateful, they do an incredible job. I'm an artist, designer, and more of like a mutt, like one of those in-between dogs that you don't really know where to place. And today we're going to do a little review of the current situation of the arts and why it's fucked. And why it's fucked. And the keys that we should keep in mind in order to create art in the era of artificial intelligence. And then we're going to go through a variety of different exercises that check everything from creativity to efficiency to universal symbols, etc. I promise it will be at least entertaining. You may like me or not like me, but you will know I am honest.
Let me just say, you will love him, not like him. And as we like to say, strap in, get ready for another fantastic Faena Rose event. I'm so excited about tonight. Sebastian is an artist that I'm incredibly fond of. He's a designer, an artist, an intellectual. I think he's got a lot of hyphens in his title. But a little bit about Sebastian. Sebastian Errazuriz. He is an internationally acclaimed as one of the most prolific designers of his generation. He is an expert in the art and science of creativity. His first principles approach to the arts has resulted in a successful scientific method of innovation across creative industries. He's a guest speaker at Harvard's Tech Lab, the Silicon Valley Computer Museum, the Tate Modern, and New York's Museum of Art and Design, amongst many others. His creations have been showcased in more than 100 exhibitions and included in permanent museum collections around the world. In fact, you probably experienced his work of art recently here during Miami Art Week, where he was our featured artist, and you probably enjoyed his maze on the beach, as well as his sculpture, Battle of the Corporate Nations, that was in our lobby. If you don't follow his Instagram account, you absolutely should. It is at Sebastian Studio, singular, not plural. I find it incredibly entertaining in a very cerebral, intellectual, academic, yet approachable, creative way, shall we say. What else? Ladies and gentlemen, he's gonna do a talk for about 45 minutes, and then we wanna open it up to conversation and to kind of Q&As. So without further ado, please welcome Sebastian Errazuriz.
Okay, so I'm going to get into trouble tonight. I'm going to do all the stuff that an artist is not supposed to do. And the first one is start by criticizing the hand that feeds you. So we're going to do a first review of the current system of the arts. we're going to check everything that is potentially wrong with it, and then we're going to check what should potentially be done, and then we're going to go through a variety of different projects, okay? And I'll try to check if you're getting bored or not. I'll go faster or slower. So we're looking again at the arts. Okay. So take me to your leader. Imagine aliens came down on Earth and said, take us to your scientific leaders. I like this example because it's very simple. It forces us to see our current reality in a different way. Within science, we're in artificial intelligence. We're figuring out how to make small nuclear fusion reactors, biotechnology, CRISPR engineering, rockets that come down to Earth or hopefully will go to other planets. In the meanwhile, if we were to say, take us to your leaders within the arts, we get a guy doing balloon dogs, a lady doing dots, another one doing spin paintings. It's kind of ridiculous. It should be shameful. We should be ashamed of taking our aliens to our current leaders within the arts. So potentially we have a problem of one-hit wonders. Now we all know what a one-hit wonder is within music. So a Vanilla Ice song qualifies as a one-hit wonder, a Milli Vanilli one-hit wonder, and so on. We know they're really catchy, they're fun, we love them, but we don't consider them seriously. Now, within the arts, unfortunately, we have a ton of one-hit wonders that are actually taken seriously. The reality is most of our most famous artists are one-hit wonders. You might ask yourself, how is that possible? How do we know that from our musicians we expect at least multiple albums where they reinvent themselves again and again and again, but not from the arts? And for me, the answer is simple. It's the amount of hours we're exposed to them. We listen to maybe 10x the amount of visual arts that we're seeing. And that's why the typical cliche phrase of, is it all good? Yeah. Typical cliche phrase of Eskimos having 50 words for snow suddenly makes sense if your environment, you're much more exposed to a medium. If we were more exposed to the visual arts, maybe we would have artists that wouldn't be childish, infantile art versions. So if Kunz and Kusama are like the Marvel movies of the arts, then Romero Brito would be like Nickelodeon for Junior for kids, right? So then we think, okay, how did this come about? And the reality is that art was always related to science. There was a series of art movements that were dictated by science. And so, for example, the Renaissance was related to anatomy and new ways of seeing perspective, or the Impressionism is related to discoveries within camera uses, Cubism to theory of relativity and the ability to see things from different perspectives, abstract expressionism to the study of emotions post-World War II, and then, for example, surrealism naturally to studies within psychology. It was always related to whatever was happening. We get to the 80s, and suddenly every single market can coexist. Every single movement can function. And artists no longer want to be misunderstood. They no longer want to work for years without being discovered. Just like the 80s boom for the models and the fashion world, all of a sudden artists were like, I want to be famous too. I don't want to be Van Gogh and only famous after I die. As a consequence, we no longer have art movements. We no longer have the arts related to sciences. And we have a wide variety of artists that will do, for example, dripping, right? So Jackson Pollock, who was famous for making drip paintings, created something that was an innovation in its time. If today you know an artist that does dripping, it is the equivalent of knowing a scientist that makes light bulbs. It's cool. I hope they make them satisfied. I hope it's great for them, but it's not an interesting contribution to society. Okay, then there's influencer artists today, right? So the idea that whatever is popular, whatever the algorithm is telling me works, is what now starts dictating the type of art that gets done. These are the people that all of their work is connected to them posing, sometimes slightly back like that. And so we have all these zombie art movements today of a wide variety of artists that are creating in styles and movements that belong to the past. They don't belong to them. They're not making contributions. They're not advancing the future of art. And then there's the internet, right? So for a wide variety of, for a long period of time, basically we all had pockets of information, pockets of know-how. So the Swiss were great at making watches, and the Italians were great at making shoes, and so on and so on. We all had different things that we had been really good at for a very long time. We had our own culture, our own ideas, our own symbolisms. And information traveled relatively slow, which meant that it was very difficult for people to copy everything from each other. The moment we're all interconnected, suddenly there's a huge boom in creativity. Creativity, by the way, is the ability to come up with new original combinations based on the same set of ingredients. So if all of a sudden as a chef, your assistants come in with 10x the amount of ingredients, it's a fascinating period of discovery. You can start playing with a ton of ingredients from different places that you didn't know existed. The problem is, when everyone is seeing what everyone is doing after a while, and when the algorithm is rewarding certain types of work, everyone starts doing whatever is the popular work. So this global access first enhances creativity and then decreases creativity. Today, it's all about style. If you think about it, most of the artists you know have a recognizable style. If the artist has a style you cannot recognize, what's the point? How are your friends going to know that you're filthy rich or that you're a great art connoisseur, right? They have to be able to recognize what you have, otherwise what's the point of having it? To a certain degree, that happens a lot. But it goes against the spirit of investigation and developing and constant checking. If you're tied to an aesthetic style, artists start becoming designers. They start developing a brand image. They start not being that different from a luxury brand that stamps their LVs everywhere. If you can recognize an artist in every single work, it starts to get a little suspicious. Kayindi Wiley, great artist, interesting artist. But imagine if they're doing the same theme all of their life. That would be like having a friend who's vegan, and every time you meet up with them, they tell you they're vegan. It's like, or the friend that does CrossFit, and every time you meet up with them, CrossFit, I do CrossFit. It's all they talk about. You meet up with them, did you know I'm doing CrossFit? It's like, I fucking know, dude. Like, calm down. It's like, it's great. How can we have artists that do the same thing forever? That it's actually well looked upon, that they're an artist that talks about the role that society has in the oppression of indigenous cultures. And that's what they do for the rest of their life. That's their theme, forever, for life. That's absolute bullshit. That is selling out to the system, that is being mediocre. That is crap. It's something that we should not take and accept from anyone. Anyone who does that for life is sold out and is an idiot. I'm not holding back. Then the next thing is one discipline, right? Why should you only do one single thing, one single discipline? Why should you only do painting or painting and sculpture? Why are you supposed to be focused on one thing? Many of you probably have businesses in different fields. Many of you have had different jobs. You've learned from the different perspectives. They've enriched your capabilities. The idea that an artist should only stick to one thing makes no sense. And then there's the artist lingo, right? That big wall text that they put up Or even worse, when the artist starts rambling about what they are doing actually. Einstein has that phrase, if you can't explain it simply enough, you don't understand it well enough. If you can get a physicist to explain secrets of the universe in a simple way in which everyone can understand, you can get an artist to explain a few existential issues that they're trying to deal with. Let's go for the persona of the artist. You all know this guy. That's bullshit. That's an outfit. And now granted, if I go to my lawyer, I don't want him to look like this guy. I don't want my doctor to look like this guy. But if you're using the paint-splattered shoes and the whole outfit, after a while, it gets a little tired. It gets a little cliched. How do you trust these guys? Would you, if they had a startup and they're pitching you, would you invest in them? I don't know if they wake up on time. It's an issue, but we don't ask ourselves these issues. And then, I don't know how many saw The Human Centipede, the movie. Horrible terror gore movie in which a mad scientist, evil mad scientist, sues the mouths of their prisoners to the assholes of other prisoners in one continuous centipede. And so whatever one eats, poops, the other one eats, poops, the other one eats, poops, and so on. We used to have art critics. That's the Human Centipede. We used to have art critics, and the art critics used to provide resistance to the artist. Just like we have a political system and we have two parties that push against each other, those tensions are necessary, because otherwise you get a series of corruptions within the system. Today, every art critic is paid for to do a fluff piece by the magazine. The magazine is paid for by the gallery. The gallery has as its buyers the same collectors that are part of the museum board that then make sure that the piece gets bought and then gets placed in the museum, so then it goes up and so on. There is no resistance to the system. We're all eating the same crap and we're all just getting morbidly obese. We have aesthetic obesity. We're eating so much shitty calories that it's like we're eating fast food. We're starting to aesthetically look like that. We have a hard time connecting emotionally, empathically to certain works because we've been eating fast food meal for a while. And yes, the emperor is butt naked. I'm saying it now, but no one says it. And it's important that we all start saying it because otherwise we're just harming the arts. And yes, NFTs, obviously, don't do it. Not for now. Are we all AI fucked? And I would say that we are. Simple reason. If up to now everything that I've described means that we're dumbing down today's artists, it is as simple as asking the most simple and basic AI we have today, the dumbest AI will ever be, make a work in the style of X, choose whichever of your most famous artists, and you will have variations of it. The reason it is not having trouble making it is because it is a simple exercise. It's because we've dumbed it down enough that a simple robot can copy and replicate everything that is currently in the top 100 artists. So we need to fix that. Okay, I was born in the circus. My father did his PhD in how to educate art. Every kid in Chile from kindergarten to 18 learns the art program that my father designed. Age 4, I was at museums every single weekend, and I was asked to criticize Turner's paintings. Age 4. 3 tests. First, which of the entire set of paintings was the first of the series? Which was the last, chronologically? Second exercise, where did the artist start the painting? Where did the artist finish the painting? It's quite tricky to do. And fourth exercise is, where was the artist painting freely? And where were they having trouble? You could figure that out by seeing the brushstrokes. When they were super worked at again and again and again, you could see it was nervous. When the brushstrokes flowed, it was much easier. You could tell the artist was having fun. I could do a portrait of one of you at age 7, 8. That was pretty good, had all the proportions, had the likeness. My father would come over my shoulder and say, Sebastian, how many times have I told you? It is not enough to have it look like the person you're portraying. Every single line you draw is as important as every line you don't draw. Every line has a different value, a different character. That was at that age. My mother, on the other hand, smarter than my father, braver than my father, for her it was all about thinking from first principles. You make up your own ideas, you enforce the world with your eyes as wide open as possible. And the moment you see things, you have to say things. The moment you know what you believe is true, you have to act. If not, you're a coward. So I had the equivalent of a sports dad for the arts, right? Imagine those kids that the father takes them to play soccer since they're age 4. I had the exact same thing for the arts. And as such, I'll give you an example. If I did a drawing that I didn't like at age 6, I would crumple it up quickly because I didn't want my father to see it. I didn't want my mother to see it. I felt guilty. I felt ashamed. I remember the other day that I would put them in my pocket and I would go out into the garden because I was afraid of throwing it into the dustbin in case they would unwrap it. That's how psychotic I was. They would unwrap it and see it, and they'd be ashamed of my shitty drawing. I would go and throw it out in the garden trash can. I believe there's no accidental gold medalist, right? I believe you don't get to be a world-class chess player, you don't get to be a world-class violinist or an Olympic medalist unless you train for it since a kid. I don't believe you get to be 18 and you were really bad at math and you didn't really excel in literature and you go, you know what, I'm going to go into the arts. I believe you have to decide if you're a professional or an amateur. You can't be both. Amateur artists don't really exist. You have to be able to put in the 80,000 hours. And so in the same way as if you play a little soccer over the weekend, you don't introduce yourself to your friends as a soccer player. Similarly, if you do a little painting over the weekend, you're not an artist. You're either living of it, working at it 12, 14 hours, or you're an amateur. And an amateur is great because it means to love. And that's something we need. But there's a difference between being a pro and not. I believe it is harder to be a professional artist today than to play in the NBA. The NBA has 500 players at any given time. There's 500 MFA programs. Of those MFA programs, the one I went into, 2,000 people applied, 10 got in. Within 3 or 4 years, I was the only one making a living out of it. There isn't any postgraduate degree of any kind that you go into it, and your chances of making a living from the postgraduate degree, which, by the way, costs 50 or 100K a year, you can't get to live out of it, or the chances are 5%. Visual artists and visual arts are like martial arts. There's belts, there's levels. And if any of you guys have recently done jiu-jitsu, you know what it's like to roll with a yellow belt, let alone try to roll with a black belt. There's different degrees. Now, even if you are a black belt within the arts, if you don't have the drive and the talent and the innovation, you're just a black belt. Here's a tricky one for all of you. I believe you either respect the arts or you don't. So what does it mean to respect the arts? For me, it means to take it with the same level of seriousness you would take your own degree. There's 756 billionaires in the US. My note over there says there's 2,781 billionaires in the world. If the ATP of business is measured in your ability to make money, and you're not in the top 3,000, but you happen to have a friend who is in the top 40 of the arts, if you take them as seriously as you take your degree, it doesn't matter if you're worth 100 million. You should be considering them with the same level of seriousness that you would consider Warren Buffett or Bernard Arnault. You either respect it with the same level or not. If it's something fun and quaint and cool, and it's your artist friends, that's okay. But it's not necessarily as helpful. We need to be able to respect it and demand from it. So it goes back to standards. We need to have standards. If we don't have standards, we cannot love the arts. We need to have tough love. Okay, so who was the best artist in history? Who was the GOAT? Leonardo da Vinci. Why is Da Vinci the GOAT?
Diversity.
Exactly. So Leonardo da Vinci, if all of you guys were art curators and we close the door and we say you guys can't eat until you make a decision who's the top artist in history, you would arrive at Da Vinci. Not only does it have the market value of the highest paintings in terms of money, but Da Vinci was obviously an architect, he was an engineer, Da Vinci was an inventor, he was an intellectual. He was a wide variety of roles. Now, as an artist today, your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to consider the arts with the same degree of seriousness that a scientist or an athlete would consider their own discipline. So if you enter basketball, you know who's the GOAT in basketball. If you want to be a swimmer, you know who's the GOAT swimming. So obviously, cause does not comply, right? Obviously, the wide variety of artists we have today are so ridiculous compared to Leonardo da Vinci that we need to up the game. And unless we're willing to say these things openly and honestly, we're not going to have better levels of artists, right? So if we're not going to look after the arts and we're not going to take them seriously, if we're not going to say the hard things out loud, then we're not going to have better generations of artists. So is art a science? Can art be measured? Okay? I believe it can. I believe the fact that we haven't discovered yet how to measure art does not believe there isn't a way to do so. I believe artificial intelligence is developing a variety of patterns that allow it to understand that which we up to now consider a blurry cloud of emotions that we haven't been able to break down into a specificity of inputs. Now, as an artist, you therefore have to decide, do you create for the current market or do you create for a future market? I believe one should create for the market of the future. One should create for your own standard. These are my 10 metrics to measure art. They might or not be yours, but tell me if they make sense. Consciousness and courage, my mother's rules. If the artist is not conscious, if they're not extremely bright and aware, it's very difficult for them to be able to do anything. If they're not courageous, they won't be able to do whatever it is they see. Originality and creativity. If they're not doing original work, they should not be making work. Life is short. We don't have time to be repeating shit. The breadth of work. How much work are you doing? Picasso did enormous quantities of work. It's different if you do 6 pieces or if you do 15 pieces. Now, trick question, because Leonardo da Vinci did, I think, 16 paintings. But he did so many more things in so many other areas. Punches landed. If you watch a boxing match, you will see the stats of a boxer's punches landed. Right? You want to know that they're accurate. Because it doesn't matter if you're throwing many, many punches. If you're landing very few, it's incredibly inefficient. So you want an artist that is landing most of their punches. Number of disciplines in which they excel. Back to Leonardo. Think of Prince as a musician. If Prince goes up on stage with the best musicians in the world, and he is known for his singing, and then does the meanest solo riff on guitar in history, that's very impressive. And that speaks of a variety of fields with which he is enriching not only his practice, but also the way he thinks and understands the ways in which we communicate. Efficiency. You want to be able to do the most with the least, right? So a master karate martial artist doesn't get into an ugly scrap rolling around in the floor for 10 minutes. It's one karate chop or one uppercut and out, one punch knockout. It needs to be as simple as possible. If you're a master, you do one twist and you transformed everything that was there. That's what a master does. Vocal range. A singer has vocal range. As an artist, you would expect them to be able to do funny, sad, empathic, powerful, strong, subtle. You would want them to do a full range of emotions. If they only do one thing again and again and again, then it's just not that good. You want every artist to make work that is universal. You want to be able to see the work and say, that could have been made by a Japanese artist, it could have been made by a Brazilian artist, it could have been made by a British artist, a Danish artist, etc. You want work that can be understood by everyone, that has universal stories, that has universal icons, so that it can reach more people. You want it to be both timely and atemporal. Timely means that it reacts to what is currently happening, to our current sensibilities and worries, and what we're concerned about today. But you want people in 20 years to be able to see it and get it. Right? So it's not like comedy about politicians of the times that the future generations can't react to or connect to. Finally, execution. An incredible idea, poorly executed, is like a beautiful image at bad resolution. You want the resolution to be as crisp as possible so that there's no interference between what you're trying to communicate and what the audience is hearing. So now we're going into some visuals, creating a system. So I was inspired by chess players. Grandmaster chess players do what's called a simultaneous exhibition. In a simultaneous exhibition, if a grandmaster, Russian grandmaster, arrives in Florida Keys, he goes to the chess club, local chess club, and they have the 20 players, and they do what's called a simultaneous exhibition. One move against one board, one move against one board, one move against one board. And they're playing against every single player at the same time. What's great about that is that most chess masters talk about intuitive pattern recognition. As an artist, you don't want to spend too much time thinking. You want to first think a lot, but then you want to shut out your brain so that your unconscious does a lot of the pattern recognition. It's quicker. It can process more information. And so I work in 30 to 40 projects in parallel at all times. I have a team. My team presents me a project like they would be presenting me a chessboard. I either know the answer immediately or I say pass, just like in a game show. You don't know the answer, pass, pass. So I keep my state of flow as quick and as constant as possible. I have a horrible surname. You've got to roll the R's, which Pablo had some trouble with. I'm always trying to figure out how to get it past. For a while, I was calling myself Sebastian E. Everyone remembered Sebastian E, but I felt like a rapper, so I took it out. I do art and design. Little hook, turned upside down. Functionality, the difference between art and design. I believe art and design are languages. Okay? So whenever I'm asked, are you an artist or a designer? I say that's equivalent to you asking me, are you an English speaker or a Spanish speaker? I'm bilingual. I speak both. Now, as long as I am fluent in both, it's okay. Because again, we don't want my problems in vocabulary to start generating issues with our communication. But then I need to be fluent in order to say something that's worthwhile saying. That's a little bit of how my studio functions. And now we're in. Sorry for the delays. Are we doing okay? Am I going too quick? Yeah? Okay. That is a piano, and it was hanging above my table for 5 years. I got the stupid, crazy idea that unless I really remembered that time was passing and I could die at any moment, I wouldn't have the constant pressure of trying to make the best possible work I could and as fast as I could. So I literally bought a ton of beer, had about 10 friends help me hoist that rope up, and had a real piano over my head. At the beginning, it felt like a really good idea. Around year 3, I hated going into the studio, and every morning, I wished that it had already broken on the floor of the studio, because I dreaded continuing to work underneath it. I knew those ropes, which they didn't have a metal cable. They weren't set up for a museum. I knew those ropes could snap. Now, that exercise still, for me, was incredibly useful. And it's part of the tricks that one needs to do. Sorry for all the loading. That's the Carnegie Museum of Art, and they had my piano. The piano is not an artwork. It's a tool. It is exhibited as a tool, not an artwork. As an artwork, it would be a shitty artwork, but it was kind of a caricature. I'm going to be passing now through a variety of different works. We're on 32 minutes. I'm going to do about 10 more minutes, in which I'm going to try and show a range of works. We're going to go through public art all the way to design and objects. And I don't claim to fulfill my 10 list of commandments, but I do try to get as close as I can. And if this was a bingo card, you guys should hold me accountable for what manages to get there or not. That 10 commandments are always in process, and it's always a list in motion getting fixed constantly. That's my studio in New York. I work a lot with technology, with robots, CNCs, 3D printers, 3D scanners. I see a lot of my works in VR and AR to be able to inspect the piece before it's made. As you can tell, I'm very anal. So let's go to public art. Okay, I'll tell you in the meanwhile. The first proposal was to grab some excavators and remove sand from the beach. We were going to basically remove sand so that the sea could enter into the beach. And the idea was we were going to calculate how much the sea, through global warming and rising of seas in general, would go up within the next 50 years. And the idea, therefore, was to remove enough sand for the water to go up into it so we could actually visually see what it looked like. The mayor didn't like that idea. I think it was related to real estate. So that one didn't fly. And then the other one that didn't fly was an intercontinental ballistic missile, actual size, that would be placed from the sea coming into the sand. I wanted to place it actually right in front of the Faena Rose members, that little nice section you guys have. And so the idea is to have the continental ballistic missile coming in as if it was sent from abroad.
Which country?
North Korea. This is Blue Marble, one of my favorite projects. And this is the first time in history that we had a live feed from a NASA satellite projected in real time into a circular LED screen down on Earth. So this is not a photo, it's live feed. The beauty of that is that you get to see the line of the Terminator, the line of the sun as it's advancing over the face of the Earth. You get to see if there's a cloud formation in Mexico and there's about to be a whole storm. It was really, really beautiful, and it was one of those incredibly complex projects that in person was very amazing. This was right before COVID. So right before that dreaded period. And it was also projected on the side of a new museum. And so we had it on multiple spots. It was really impressive as a... Huh? The other place is in Soho House, Ludlow. It's that same street on Ludlow, like a block away, an empty spot between both of them. This is a pause for the city that never sleeps. So I live in New York. New Yorkers are incredibly unempathic and constantly running around. So what if I could get all the screens, the jumbo screens in Times Square, and start yawning again and again? Yawns are contagious. If I start yawning now, chances are you might start yawning. And if I tell you you're empathic, if you yawn, you might want to fake yawn just to look empathic and not psychopathic. But basically, if you start getting an epidemic of yawns in the center of the city as they spread and people start getting tired and go back to their hotels, you start spreading the yawns throughout the city. It actually worked, at least within there. We couldn't monitor it as it went out, but it was really amazing to see how people would all start yawning. It was quite impressive. I am Chilean, and so we had the 33 miners trapped underground in Chile. When I heard about it first, and the president of Chile said it would take 3 to 4 months to get them out, I thought, those guys are fucked, they're going to die down there. So I flew down to Chile. And I remember that Chile's former highest building was 33 stories high. So coincidence, 33 stories high. We had 33 miners trapped below. I managed to convince every single floor to let me install a giant lamp on the window. So at every night, you would have this cross of light that would lit up, and it would be seen from all out of Santiago. So it would be a reminder that the miners were still trapped below. Fortunately, the project of the miners went viral. It was an unprecedented press coverage. And so my tower was actually not needed. But for me, it would have been amazing if it had been a contribution. This is a little orchestra that anyone could direct. So my name is Juan Sebastian. My father was a fan of Bach, and my dad was always directing imaginary orchestras. So how do I offer that to people? I managed to convince an orchestra. I gave them little instructions that were almost similar to the instructions you would find on the safety leaflet of an airplane, right? And so up, volume low, that side of the orchestra, faster, 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 slower, slower, slower. That allowed a variety of people to go up on stage, get the baton. You were suddenly in a position of power, suddenly visible by everyone else. And suddenly you would hear the orchestra roar as you would interact with them. This is one of my favorites, Chile again. 1973, General Pinochet, with the help of the CIA, goes into power, take down the Communist Party president, and they have all of the political people that were against them imprisoned in the National Stadium. Chile's National Stadium had no cleansing of any kind. There was never a plaque placed outside that said, in this stadium, thousands of people were tortured, some were killed and imprisoned. I managed to save up enough money. By the way, I'm not from the Errazuriz that are the really rich ones. I'm from the really poor ones. And so I actually had to sell a lot of artwork and do a lot of parties with DJ friends to raise up enough money to basically get the National Stadium for a week. We brought in heavy machinery, dug up a hole, planted a tree in the middle, and for a week you could enter the field. The field is very high in buildings, in walls, and so it would be quite quiet, even though it was downtown Santiago. And to end that week of walking into a field decontextualized, turned into a memorial park, I managed to convince Chile's national soccer team, with the guys that play in Real Madrid and Barcelona, to play a match with the tree in the middle. I had to have a guy on top of the tree to throw the ball down whenever the ball came up on the tree. And the audiences would roar and clap way more when they played around the tree than when others. So projects can be that complex or this simple. At the beginning, as I told you, I had no money, and so I would fly to Chile to have some pieces made there. My flight from New York was always New York, Atlanta, Santiago, or New York, Atlanta, Buenos Aires, Santiago. That was the cheapest I could get. In Atlanta, the US Armed Forces come back in. It's not like in the movies. They don't travel in big Hercules planes. They travel in their gear, and they're on that same line that you go, and you see them come back, and their eyes were always the eyes of people that were fucked up. And so I started checking, because I'm a geek and I'm a little bit on the spectrum, obviously. So I started checking stats. What happens with these guys? What's the suicide rate? At the time, there was no stats of the suicide rate in the military. I found them by branches, separate branches. I added them up, and at the time, I didn't have Instagram, I had Facebook. I posted on Facebook the stats that I had found. US soldiers in 2009 had committed suicide at twice the rate than were being killed by enemy fire. I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe that was real and not known by the public. None of my Facebook friends gave a shit. And so I posted it out in the real world. Can of paint, brush, took me a day. I thought it was going to be quicker. And you mark it just like the prisoner in the movie marks, right? That image went viral, and it managed to get journalists from CNN to start writing about it. And so it's a piece that actually functioned. Art is not supposed to function, but artists, we do have a responsibility with society. And our art should function. It's not just about satisfying our own vanity or egos or childhood problems. Very simple again, paint. Okay, so transforming lines into dollar signs because it's Wall Street nation, right? That's what money is all about. That's what is mandating everything. This is Miami. So I wanted on the last day of Art Basel, the Sunday where the collectors don't go anymore to the fair, I wanted to have the plane fly in front saying, "You're all going to die." That was my phrase. I thought it was great. It's true, so there's nothing wrong with that. But the Federal Aviation Association was like, "No, you can't fly. We're all going to die." And I was like, "Well, why not? It's just true." They were like, "Yeah, well, people might think you're a terrorist. They won't know." So I sent them 10 different phrases that were similar. And the only one that was allowed to fly was "Death is the only certainty in life." So that was flying right in front of Faena. Another very, very simple project. I've always wanted to have a studio, a second studio in Paris. And so since I can't afford it, 2 studios are a little expensive, I just had a lot of plaques made that say Sebastian Studio. And I posted them all over Paris. So that's the Palace of Justice. And this place you might know too. They're now all my studios. Obviously, they didn't last too long, and I was careful not to damage anything, but they're there. I managed to get the Times Square screens by doing this project for free for a developer in Brooklyn. So a developer in Brooklyn with a really bad temper. Everyone was very afraid of him. And he wanted a project to get people to go to their location. New area called Industry City at the time. And so I said, what if we celebrate in a Latin way with a giant piñata? And let's make it the Wall Street Bowl. And let's fill it up with money. And he goes like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, we need to have a press release that says there's thousands of dollars inside. He's like, Sebastian, I'm not going to put thousands of dollars inside a giant piñata. And I'm like, listen, if we put $2,000, it's thousands. It's okay. So as long as we put 2,000 inside, it's fine. And so the guy said, okay, how much are you going to charge me? And I knew he was super tight and he was going to be a pain in the ass to work with. And I said, you know what? You're just going to pay the cost to a group of people I'm going to connect you with, and you're going to owe me a favor. And so when I couldn't get the Times Square project to be passed, I called Michael up and I said, Michael, Sebastian, remember me? Yeah, I need a favor. I know you own one of the buildings in Times Square that has one of the screens. Can you make a call to this person? Sebastian, I got you. That afternoon, I got called that the project had been approved. And this is a live cow rescued from a slaughterhouse, taken to the top of a 10-story building that had been previously covered in grass so the cow could live there. This was the first public art project I did, and I did it just for myself. I wanted to prove to myself the impossible was possible. And the really crazy thing about this one is that even though I was broke and I had no way of doing this, and this was really difficult, I mean, everything from closing down a street to figuring out all kinds of legal issues and so on. The moment I started telling people I had decided to put a live cow on a roof, to my surprise, they started saying, "Can I help too?" And so all of a sudden, I had a whole group of young lawyers that were worried of figuring out how to make sure the cow mobile wasn't going to be stopped. I had a whole bunch of veterinarians looking after the cow. I had a contract for a seaside farm for the cow to live after. And this is, we're going to do 2 more really simple ones in Miami. This was the view I had before going out to Art Basel every day, and I hated all those cones. They were on the other side of the Icon Start building that's by, yeah? And so I was like, we've got to rearrange those, and I went down with a friend and rearranged them in a better way. It's a little bit more fun, right? Now, obviously, then the cops came in and rearranged them again, and so we rearranged them the next day. But then I didn't want to push my luck. And this is the renderings for the maze that got accepted. But this is the one I was telling you about, that the mayor wasn't so fond of. And then this is my intercontinental ballistic missile, and that would be you guys somewhere in front. Okay. So, how are we doing? Can I 10 more minutes? Yeah. Okay. So, mortality. I believe it's super important to be conscious that we're going to die soon. Not because I love, I don't know, metal music or I'm a goth at heart, simply because just like Steve Jobs said in that commencement speech, the moment you know life is short, it suddenly allows you to figure out things in a different manner. It allows you to understand what is important and what isn't. It allows you to maybe drive the energy that you need to do that project that you wouldn't do otherwise. And so I do a lot of projects with death. This is a maquette for my boat coffin. I have a coffin, and it's a boat. And the idea is that if the doctor says, Sebastian, you've got 2 weeks to live, instead of spending the last week in a hospital bed plugged into a bunch of stuff, I invite all my friends to a giant, massive party. And then when I'm really drunk, you hoist me up on my little boat coffin, and I go all the way into the middle. And I die in front of the heavens and then go out with a bang in a good way. Very simple project. Mass shootings in the US. I have a printer connected to a shredder. The printer is connected to a website that is collecting all of the news from both sides of the aisle after a shooting. The people that say it's not time yet to talk about measures, and the people that say we need to block guns and so on. They all get printed, they all get shredded. Printed, shredded, printed, shredded, printed, shredded. And the idea is that that piece would go on until it's solved. Always important. This piece I love. This is the first watch that doesn't tell you the time. It tells you the watch that time is passing. So it's a wind-up clock. You have mechanical clocks that are the ones that are constantly moving. You have the battery clock that's by itself. And then there's the wind-up. The wind-up only lasts about 24, 36, 48 hours, depending on the watch. And so the act of winding it up every day, a watch that doesn't have hour sticks or minute sticks, it only has the seconds ticking. Tick, 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 tick. These things are loud. Tick, 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 tick. The act of winding it up, this useless little watch, is an act in awareness. I want to be aware of the time passing today. I want to make the most of my time today. Can I get a hands up who has a fire extinguisher at home? Okay, and now of those, who knows where the fire extinguisher is? That's pretty good. It's a pretty good average. Vast majority of people don't have a fire extinguisher at home, even though by law we have to have one in commercial spaces, which makes no sense because we're basically protecting our commercial spaces more than our family, our values, our kids, our pets. The people that have a fire extinguisher at home, many of them don't know where the hell that is. If a fire starts in your home, you don't know where the fuck the fire extinguisher is. So,
I camouflaged the fire extinguisher as a sculpture, fixed it. Now you can hoist it and place it in a place of honor. You can have it in a pedestal outside. Everyone knows where the fire extinguisher is. So it's really a design camouflaged as an artwork. I don't do coke. I'm already quite hyper, as you might have noticed. But a lot of my friends did when I first arrived in New York. And while I sipped my whiskey, I would watch them making these lines in a really sort of convoluted way. And so the next event, I came with my own board. And so it has a few holes in it. So you swipe and all the lines are made immediately. Now, you can tell I don't do coke because those lines are way too fat and I'd be ODing otherwise. Although maybe you know someone that does that size. Keanu Reeves. Keanu lived all his life in Chateau Marmont, and he had never had a home. And when he wanted to have a home, he wanted everything to be special. And so we're talking, and they had bought a couple of my pieces. And I said, Keanu, what's your desk going to be? And he said, why the desk? And I'm like, well, the desk is the most important spot. It's where you make your decisions. It's where you think about the next movie you're going to do. It's where you will write your will. And so your desk needs to be important. It can't just be a design. It needs to be a reminder of your mortality. So Keanu goes, okay, present me an idea. And I figured I need to make Keanu an autopsy table, the last table he would ever be on. So I send him all the drawings, and the gallery goes, Sebastian, you're crazy. You're going to fuck up this commission. It's an important... And I go like, please send them over. His art dealer, his art advisor goes, he's going to fuck up this commission. The gallery goes, unless you present it, he's not going to present anything else. To my luck, Keanu very generously said, you know what, I'll do it. He flew down to New York, stripped down naked, and we did a high-resolution image of him. And then it was placed in this table, which is carved in the marble to have all of the real autopsy tools. This is his desk. It was sent to him afterwards. And the amazing thing is that I sent him an email like 3 months after, and I go, Keanu, did you like the project? And I got no answer. I'm like, okay, he's a busy guy. I waited 2 months. Keanu, let me know if it was all okay. Was it okay? Nothing. I waited another 3 months, and I go, Keanu, great new movie. Let me know if you like the piece. Is everything okay? Nothing. And I felt really bad. I thought, I fucked up. I emotionally bullied this guy. He saw me so energetic and passionate about the idea that he didn't want to let me down. He did it, but he was never into it. And I felt really shitty because I generally believe in trying to give more than someone gives you. If someone gives you an opportunity, I try to always give back more than what is commissioned. And a year after the piece was sent to him, I got one day an inbox, email from Keanu, 1.5 pages, everything he told me that was going to happen, happened. And I think there's a beauty there in thinking of pieces almost as a psychologist would think of something. This is a real Norton Commando racing motorbike, and in the previous image, no, actually this one. Sorry, that's my coffin. There. Racing motorbike, if any of you guys have raced one, you have to really lean down low. Your heart is right connected on the tank, and you're hitting a lot of bugs and occasionally some birds. So I wanted a beautiful little fragile bird in the strongest, most metallic bike I could make. So that it would, again, mortality. That's my coffin. That's the other thing, by the way. All the pieces are as simple as I can make them. Remember, I'm trying to be efficient, but there's always layerings. So if you check, there's little homages to Joseph Beuys, for example, or lots of other details to other artists. There's always little homages. You want to layer an artwork so that it's incredibly simple, so that my grandmother could understand it, but at the same time, someone who understands from the arts can see a lot of how it's done. A big part of the work I do is collectible furniture, which is quite fascinating as a field. And I wanted to make the most luxurious furniture piece possible. And I thought, how do I make the most luxurious piece ever? And I was like, well, it would need to have a human head in it. What if I chucked the head in for free, like kind of like a part of the combo? And so this one comes with a head. This is my Roomba. I'm imagining many of you guys have a Roomba. I hate Roombas. They're incredibly ugly. You might have the most beautiful apartment and there's a really fucking ugly Roomba on the corner that you hate. So mine has a little cover, and the cover is inspired by the typical YouTube meme of the cat on top of the Roomba. But naturally, this is the version of the cat that's in the British Museum. And my Roomba is also an urn. So it makes sense that you collect dust, from dust you come, dust you will be, and so on. Company asked me to design a fly swatter. So I came back with this fly swatter, and they said, no, it's too violent. We can't put it into the market. I was like, what the fuck do you mean it's too violent? It's like, it's a fly swatter. He's like, no, but you can't. And I'm like, well, I want people to be conscious of what they're about to do. I want them to be like, die, right? And they were like, no, it's too violent. And so I designed the following one. And so this is a benign one, right? So it's statistically calculated so the fly has a 13% chance of passing through the hole and surviving. So it's a benign one. Now, if you're religious, it was saved by the mercy of the Lord Almighty. That's my New York Park bench. A New York Park bench costs about $35,000 if you want to leave one for a loved one. Again, the same plaques I used in Paris, they only cost about $5 each in Chinatown. So last I counted, of the 50 New York Park benches I have about 3 left. And this is a client who asked me to design his Gulfstream 650. If any of you occasionally fly private, you guys know that more or less at certain level, there isn't that much more. Okay, now my client was friends with Richard Branson and other people, and they would all meet up in Necker Island with all of their nice jets. And so he's like, I want to have the better jet. And I'm like, I got you. I'm going to figure something out. And so at first, I wanted him to have a jet that was also a hospital. Because in my head, if all the big swinging dicks are together partying and one of them chokes on a piece of meat while they're barbecuing, to be able to say, Richard, take my jet, was kind of fascinating and more amazing, right? You're saving your friend. But my collector goes, I don't want a flying hospital, I want a flying penthouse. So the idea was to present a kind of Lalanne monkey that was also safe. And in a private jet that you only have about, 8 seats generally, to be able to sacrifice one of them and not be able to invite 3 couples. But it was just kind of an extra luxury. And the most fun thing was time underneath, because it's time passing. And if you have all the money in the world, that is the most valuable commodity, plus it's kind of fun to pass over. Originally, just like the intercontinental ballistic missile, I wanted it to say, goodbye losers, but that also didn't fly. 5 more minutes? Are we good? Antiquities. I work a lot with antiquities because they are a primary medium that is extremely valuable. For me, they're just cinder blocks. But I love the idea of going to the British Museum, 3D scanning these pieces that were the most important pieces in history, and appropriating them and transforming them into mundane pieces of furniture. I love that piece, and it opens up in a really beautiful manner. No one designs bathtubs. So this one has a harpy. There's also a version with a nice Venus. But in that moment of vulnerability, to have a harpy looking back at you just seemed absolutely beautiful. And yes, it's calculated so that legs pass underneath the figure. Using, again, cinder blocks. It's disrespecting the art so you can see them in a different way. So you can touch the artwork, so you can have a different relationship with it. I also like fucking a little with the hierarchies of the creative fields. It doesn't necessarily make sense that the art, especially in today's era, as we established, should be the top of the pyramid. This one's really nice. We saw hundreds of statues get toppled. Confederate soldiers get toppled throughout the US. Whether you're for the toppling or against the toppling, the municipalities were left with a problem. What do we do with the toppled sculptures? Do we sell them? Do we destroy them? Do we store them? And I thought, well, what if we just leave them on the floor in this new position? What if we just throw a slab on top and transform them into a bench so they can actually be used? The figure is now grounded in its new place, but at least now we're not erasing history. And ideally, just like we remember a history we must never forget and must never be repeated, we also remember, hopefully proud, the day we choose to take them down. A beautiful case, my gallerist in London was turning 30 years as a gallerist. It coincided with my exhibition at the time. And I go, David, I want to make a piece for you as part of this show in your honor. David goes, oh, that's great. What would you like to make? And I go, well, you've been selling stuff to your collectors for 30 years, and I'm sure many of them are satisfied and love you, but some of them must have felt a little swindled every now and then. So I want them to have an opportunity to get back at you and kick you around, but they first need to pay for it. So it's a doorstop, okay? Bronze doorstop. So David, being incredibly smart and wiser than me, goes, Sebastian, that's a great idea. I'll do it if you do it first. Naturally, David never scanned his head, and it was my head on the floor at the end of the show. Love this piece, very simple, just broken parts and pieces. If you think of the Nike, the Venus that I showed you before that is at the top of the stairs at the Louvre, the reason why it's one of the most beautiful and loved sculptures is because it's missing the head. It maintains the mystery and it keeps us stuck because we can't fully comprehend it. We can't fully close it, which is why we continue to be interested. So there's something really nice with brokenness. And this, again, another favorite. Really using sculptures in the most brutal manner possible. Mixing literature and the arts, right? I wanted to have a sort of IKEA-like feel of a shelf with one of these sculptures, and I found a photo of the Statue of Liberty being developed as a maquette in Paris, and it had scaffolds, and I thought, if I can use the scaffolds as shelving systems, right? I'm putting blueprints so you guys know that with my team we work really hard. Fireplaces. Most people don't design fireplaces. As a kid, I always thought the opera looked like a fireplace. So my fireplace is transformed into an opera. It has little curtains, it has little steps, it has floorboards, and it comes with a backstage and a bucket of wooden figures. And if you're feeling incredibly filthy rich that day, you can light up a match, open up a $1,000 bottle of wine, and you can unleash the drama in your house and have that thing burn up and then be left in the soot and the black looking after you. And I will give you another bucket for an enormous amount of money. That's an even more fabulous one. Coffee tables. Coffee tables are all supposed to be low so they don't interfere with the people on the other side. I obviously didn't want to do that, so let's have something interfering that's in between. Let's have the art being more important than our conversation. This one I love. If you've gone through the Metropolitan Museum, you've seen that the vast majority of sculptures are missing their penis. Okay? Now, why is that? There's a variety of reasons. One, enemies would come in and they would knock it off as a way to make the person look bad. The church would want to cover them with things or knock them off. Or they're the weakest link. Now, the beauty is that if these sculptures are erected, and I use the word appropriately, in honor of male prowess, the fact that they're all missing their member is quite interesting. And so to be able to recreate it and create now some paperweights paperweights that are the most useless object today because we no longer have fans. We all have AC, so we don't even need a stupid paperweight. It's just continuing the pun on the pun on the pun. More of the same. Very simple, quite beautiful. This is the Narcissus vessel. We're all obsessed with our reflection. There's something about the idea of how do I capture the reflection of Narcissus without using a mirror, without using a screen. It's really beautiful when it has water in it because you actually see the piece coming out. The bust lamp, purposely busted with gold leaf on its interior. And this is a sculpture half constructed, half liberated from the block so that it's still tied to its function and it's still a table. Same piece again. You can see my head as a doorstop on the floor there. This piece is really, really tricky, very hard to do. Every one of those doors, not hand-carved, carved in marble with a CNC robot. It starts with a 80-pound slab, 200-pound slab that gets milled down to 40 pounds. It's milled on both ends, in and out. That was impressive. On the inside, it's milled almost like as if it was a low-resolution construction, and it leaves the passing of the mill. You guys saw the sculpture of a series. The series was an exhibition called The Beginning of the End. It was 2017. The impact of artificial intelligence on society. So all of the figures that are basically the future icons, the future figures you would find in a museum, the roles they play in it. That's AGI, artificial general intelligence. Musk, Zuck has all of the poppy seeds over there, right? So it's the ones that are used for opium. And at the bottom on the next, that's Edward Snowden, right? The fall of the resistance. And that's the piece we had here. And this continues, and you guys should continue it on the book, because it just goes on and on and on.